Blended workforces are one of the hottest talent strategies today, where employers are using a mix of traditional employees with external resources like independent contractors, coaches, consultants, vendors, and technology solutions, all in order to enhance competitiveness, ensure cost flexibility, and expedite business goals. But how are the successful companies infusing blended workforces into their business strategy? And what are the critical success factors and pitfalls to avoid during implementation? And on the flip side, what does it really take for suppliers to improve their chances of finding and landing contract opportunities? The devil is in the details, my friends. I'm your host, Karen Farrell Rhodes, and it's time to get smarter about blended workforces at work. Hello, my superstars. This is Karen, and welcome to another episode of the Blended Workforces at Work podcast. We are super excited to have today on the show Miss Shari Simpson, who's the Senior Manager of Thought Leadership at Paylocity. And Paylocity, for those of you who don't know, is one of the most modern human capital management platforms around. And in my over 20-year career in HR, I've known about them for quite some time. So when I tell you they are premier, they really are. And I wasn't paid to endorse them or anything like that. I just appreciate all the great work they do in helping businesses. And they are a premier supplier and vendor of choice. But Shari is also the host of the HR Mixtape podcast, a sought after speaker, and she also shares my passion around shaping the future of HR. So we are so honored to have her today, and welcome to the show, Shari.
Karen, thank you so much for having me on. I love being on this side of the mic.
I bet you do. I bet you do. And listeners, you're probably hearing the doggies. It seems like there's a truck outside. So I apologize about that, but you all know they're part of the show as well. So But thank you again, Sherry, for joining. Boy, we have a lot I'd love to talk to you about. But before we get started, for just as much as you feel comfortable, we love to get a sneak peek into our guests' lives outside of work. So would you mind sharing just a tad with us about what you enjoy doing?
Yeah, so I am an avid reader. Every chance I get, I have a book or a Kindle with me to make sure that I'm not only enjoying some fiction, but also I try to make sure I have one of those really great business books in the lineup. I am also a mother of three military. One is actually a veteran, and two are active duty. One is currently deployed right now. I am a mom dog to two beautiful black big dogs that I absolutely love and spend time with. And I am working on my doctoral degree alongside my husband, who's also doing it because, as empty nesters, that's what you do, right? You go back to school.
Right. Well, you actually do. I will vouch for that. I'm a recent empty nester myself, too young to retire, way too young to retire, unfortunately. So I haven't gone for the PhD, but what I have, I was accepted to a major program trying to help get more women and people of color on corporate boards. And so that's like a mini MBA all in itself. So a development route, a different route, but I want to give you high fives and congratulate with you and your husband for
Thank
taking the
you.
leap to getting your PhDs. That's awesome. If I don't mind, can I ask, what are you looking to specialize in?
Yeah, so I'm going for a doctorate of education in leadership and innovation, which aligns very well, I think, to the conversation we're
Very
going to
well.
have.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to be able to give back as soon as I have that designation. I'm about a year out from finishing. I start my dissertation paperwork here in about 3 weeks.
Oh, how exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to have a virtual celebration when you finish. But I'm going to send good wishes your way that you round it out very soon because I know it's been a journey for you all.
Thank you.
All right, well, let's go ahead and delve in, Shiri. And I'd love for you to start with a little bit about your professional history, just a high level, up to date. And then if you can share with us what you actually do at Paylocity.
Yeah. So, as most HR people, I did not start off in HR.
That's true.
um, I always love when I meet the unicorns who did start out in HR, and that was their whole intent. I actually started out in mental health. I had my undergrad is in adolescent studies. And I was working for the best supervisor leader I have ever worked for in my 20 plus career. And
Wow.
he pulled me aside one day, and I'm making this story very short compared to the extent of it, but pulled me aside one day and said, "Hey, you know what? You're in the wrong profession." And I was like, "What? What do you mean I'm in the wrong profession?" And he's like, "You should be in HR." And I'm like, "The policy police?" I was like, I
No way.
don't think I wanna do that. That's not my personality, and he was very insightful. He sat me down, he's like, "No, let's talk about your skill set and what I'm observing from you, why I think it aligns to that profession," and I never looked back from his advice. I moved forward, I switched careers, I went and got, advanced education, and I have done all the things. So, talent acquisition, payroll, benefits, employee relations, training and development. In fact, I started at Paylocity as an HR business partner. Just about 8 years ago, actually, I just celebrated my 8-year anniversary this week.
Wow.
And thank
Congratulations.
you, thank you. And I was supporting the product and technology arm of our company for a couple years. Absolutely loved it. The developers we have are some of the most passionate people I've ever worked with. And I had a really great opportunity to move into a more programmatic role from the perspective of corporate HR initiatives, making sure that as we rolled programs out that they were uniformed enough, but also had those custom levers for different parts of our business that could support our business partners and the initiatives that they had. And then it just kind of evolved into this role around thought leadership where I have this really great opportunity to spend time creating public facing content. So that goes through the podcast. I do monthly webinars. I get to attend conferences and speak and hold conference sessions. But really, it's about helping others reach that aha moment through all of those different venues and seeing, the work that I do and the research that I'm interested in as a real source for people so that they have another place to go to as a trusted source of information.
Oh, I love that. It sounds like your role is very similar to we had on the podcast Tony Buffum, who is the head of corporate relations for Upwork. And he
Okay.
does something that's very, very similar. And listeners, you can search our site or your platform of choice to check out Tony's episode. But he does the same thing, trying to think, he speaks a lot. He tries to help all types of stakeholders get that aha moment about what they can do to really help their companies, their initiatives, or even themselves. And it sounds like you do something very similar. And I think you have the coolest role because
I do too. So
I love to share what I call my superpower is strategic ideation. And so I'll always love to talk strategy and ideate and talk and converse with people to come up with super great ideas or pathways. And that whole collaboration thing is what I would do for free if I didn't have to pay the light bill every now
right.
and then. So I'm
Unfortunately.
really jealous of that role. In your role, what has been maybe one of your aha moments as you go around speaking and talking to clients and even in your internal staff? Could you share maybe one aha moment that for yourself that really resonates with you?
Yeah. So I am an extrovert to the most specific definition of it.
Me
And
too.
if you've taken Clifton Strengths Finder, my top two are woo and relator. So I have a broad network. I like to get to know people and get real deep real quick. And one of my biggest ahas through that experience, both internally and, just talking to the larger HR community is I need to talk less and listen more. And that for me was an aha moment because I don't know that I had in the past connected that to I'm going to have great, rich, robust conversations if I'm quiet more and listen more and show empathy more. And so over the years, I've really tried to make that transition and become real vulnerable to listening as far as things like getting feedback when you speak, giving your audience the opportunity to give you, feedback using a tool like Talkadot or something like that. Some of that feedback is pretty hard to hear, but it has made me just that much more connected to the people that I love and to my peers. So yeah, talk less, listen more.
You know what? I'm going to take that lesson as well because I'm an over the chart extrovert like you are. I think that's why we're in the business we're in and have podcasts and try to be out there with people because we love it. We get our energy from people. But I do understand that sometimes I need to listen more, pull back. a lot of the clients that our firm has worked with are kind of in the technology or engineering spaces. And I realized it was so funny. I realized that I was scaring some of them because, not to put anyone stereotypical, but usually they're more reserved. They just don't like people, all in their space all the time. And I was. And so I think that I'm going to take that lesson from you to apply to myself as well. To talk less, listen more, and get more out of the conversation by learning more about others.
Yeah.
So I thank you for that gift.
Aw, you're welcome.
Yeah. So let's talk about trends that you all are seeing either at Paylocity or you in particular in the general workforce. A lot of things have evolved even over the last few months, last few years. The way the world works has shifted quite a bit. Where do you think organizations are really struggling, and what opportunities do you happen to see in the horizon that lie ahead?
I think this is a really big question. Oh, because I see differences in different size populations in our HR peers. I think those that are those HR departments of one, which we know there's a lot of them out there, or those smaller HR departments that are, dispersed. You might have payroll and accounting, and your HR person might be somebody who is learning as they go. They're cutting their teeth. They used to be in a different
Yeah.
role. So I think for that population, AI is something that they're struggling with, just trying to figure out how to get
Yeah.
started with it.
Yeah.
There's so many amazing AI tools out there right now
There
beyond your
are.
basics of asking Chat GPT questions. And I'm not going to go through a list because I think that would be unfair to any vendor, but there are great tools out there where you can go in and put in a brief outline and it creates an entire PowerPoint deck for you with beautiful
Yes.
pictures. And so there's all these tools out there at that level, and then you kind of blow that up, right? And you go enterprise level. Our enterprise friends are trying to figure out, how do we start to embed this so we can create better customer experience? How can
Exactly.
we support our employees better? One of the things that Paylocity has done with our software that's getting released to general public in the next few weeks here, I think. It is public, so I'm not kind of giving you a peek behind the curtain.
Okay,
Um,
good.
so one of the things that we've done is we've added the ability to use our embedded AI chat model, our AI assistant, for employees to ask questions against the employer's handbook. Talk about something that sounds so simple, having such a huge impact on the HR's person's day to day. I mean, we all know that we've spent so many times answering questions that you're like, if you just read the handbook, you would know
Yeah,
the
right.
so I think AI
Yeah.
in all aspects we're trying to figure out. So that's one of the biggest trends. I think the other trend is we're trying to figure out our own definitions of inclusion inside of our organizations. I think for everybody that means something different for different organizations and different populations, but Gen Z will continue to drive us to have that embedded in our organizations, whether it's you're focusing on equity or you're focusing on pay transparency or you're just trying to get the definitions of what your organization thinks inclusion is. Those are something that I think is on the forefront of a lot of people right now. And we're going to see more and more conversation about that. And then, for a top three, I think the last one is this shift from traditional kind of job or ladder progression or even lattice progression in roles to a more skills based focus of moving people around the organization and hiring
Absolutely.
differently, hiring for those skills instead of going through this laundry list of your responsibilities. Because we know that sometimes you have people who are very quick to learn a new skill. And so how do you start to leverage some of that stuff in your organization just differently than you have before?
Absolutely. I actually spoke on that topic at Gallup's headquarters on a Future of People Summit, and we talked about that in depth. And that is, you're so right. That is a top trend both now and in the future, on the
Yeah.
focus on skills. And the other thing I'll mention is I have never in my career seen an overstaffed HR department. And if you all can find one, I would love to meet them and see what one looks like. But my point being is that the complexity of the talent agenda at organizations continues to be a point of focus for CEOs and board members and the entire organization. But so many times HR, like you said, they didn't go to school for it per se. They're learning it on the spot. They may only be a department of one or two. They're responsible for the operational basics to keep the organization going. And then the whole other, strategy side and other duties as assigned is just heavy to bear. So I encourage all business leaders out there too is to give a lot of more support to your HR teams. Their advocate, obviously. And, use services like Paylocity. I love your AI assistant because you're so right. There are so many questions that come into HR that if they had just read the book or, it takes away from the time that or the productivity of our HR teams. And so using a fantastic platform and tool like that could make a real difference. So I know it's going to be a winner. I definitely do. And I encourage anyone out there to, definitely check it out since they're releasing it this year. Has it been released yet or is it going to be
It's
soon?
it's phased. So,
It's phased. Okay.
something that's really cool about us is we release everything to our employee population first. We actually
Oh,
call it
good try.
DOOW, drinking our own wine.
Oh,
It
nice.
comes out of the tech space where they actually use the phrase "eating your own dog food."
Yeah,
We
that's what
thought
I
we were a little
remember.
bit better than eating our own dog food. So we DOOW everything in our org. So it has been available to us for a little bit, and it's going out to some of our beta testers, and then it'll be available for general application.
Amazing, amazing. I'm curious what in your role as a thought leadership, how do you determine what topics to talk about when you go out and speak? Or where is your focus right now? What are you learning more about to get ready
Yeah.
to share?
I love this question. So I do a lot of reading, a lot of listening to podcasts. I will say that my focus has actually transitioned a little bit from, just reading HR information to really focusing more on business information. I find that when I can lean into, articles that I'm reading out of the Wall Street Journal or Forbes or those kinds of things, those are all impacting HR professionals because
Absolutely.
ultimately, right, our business acumen gives us the ability to be the strategic leaders in our organizations. And that's the place we should sit, right, at that strategy point where we can bring that to the table. So when I go and I speak publicly, I try to make sure that the content I'm providing taps into business acumen in some way, provides very needed tactical information. I think sometimes when you go to conferences, you might get inspired by a session and then you walk away and go, okay, yeah, but what can I do with that? Like that was cool.
Right.
um, but like, what can I do with it? So I actually took a different approach this year. Every year I try to create a set of content or a set of decks that I'm going to present on. So this year I decided to go a little kitschy. And so I have aligned my content to either movies or TV shows and have pulled in some of the things that I think are kind of most important. So one of them has to do with the movie The Sandlot and building teams. One of them has to do with the Queen's Gambit and being strategic in your workforce development. And so, really, it's about understanding what are the trends out there, what are HR professionals trying to accomplish from a business perspective, and then what tactically can we provide and make sure that, no matter where you sit in the HR realm, whether you're a specialist or a generalist or you're on that precipice of being a CHRO, can you come to this session and get something out of it?
Well, Sherry, we are definitely sisters from other mothers because I do the same thing. I'm a movie fanatic, and since I movie and sports fanatic, but I bring in samples of movies to talk about points or help to illustrate points, or I talk about some kind of sports event or sports celebrity to make a point as well. And usually between the two of them, that captures or make the audience in some kind of way and makes them smile. So boy, great minds think alike.
They sure do. They sure do.
So, would love for you to also share a little bit about your HR Mixtape podcast. Would I always love to promote fellow podcasters that are doing big things and getting messages out. So can you give our listeners a sneak peek into your podcast, so in case they want to add it to their playlist?
Yeah, so really the intent was I want to talk about things that HR professionals have on their mind and not kind of box myself into any one particular category. Hence
Yeah,
why we picked the name mixtape to make
I
sure that
love it.
it was clear we were mixing it up. So I've had everybody on from Johnny C. Taylor from Sherm has been on. I've had the former president of the Miami Marlins baseball team on. I've had people on to talk about writing a book because I swear we are all writing a book in our heads if you work in HR. You have those
Yep.
stories that you think somebody needs to hear at some point, so you're trying to figure out how to put those in a book. And to very serious topics about, how do you handle sexual assault in your organization to, how do you think about things like ageism? So it's all over the board. It's concise. So 20-25 minute episodes, and we release every Tuesday morning.
Nice. All right. Well, listeners, there's another one to add to your playlist, because if you're listening to this podcast, these topics really will probably pique your interest. So definitely check out Shari's podcast as well, HR Mixtape. Another question I'd love to ask you, I don't want to get into, deep into politics and all that kind of thing, but the whole geopolitical climates around the world, are really impacting business and business strategy, and it trickles down to the HR and talent agendas as well. Are there any things that you're seeing trend wise, or if you've gotten feedback from your audiences on how they're thinking through how to take into account like what's happening in Europe versus what's happening in the US versus elsewhere?
This is a this is
I know it's
this
a
is
deep
a
question.
yeah, it's a heavy topic, and it's one that as HR professionals we're struggling to navigate. We have to
We
figure it
are,
out. I
yeah.
genuinely believe that. I think what I am seeing is there's definitely a shift in the types of conversations that we're willing to have publicly. That's
Yep,
changing. I think
absolutely.
that we're at a point now where we need to have those tougher conversations with our leadership teams and ask them what as a company we've decided we're going to sit, whether you're going to be pro something or anti something or neutral, with again without getting into
Yeah.
politics and details. A great example of this, and this really highlighted it for me about how different organizations can take a different approach and still be supportive of their employees, was when Roe v. Wade was overturned. There was a whole conversation about it, kind of in the space. Do we change our benefit programs? Do we not change our benefit programs? How do
Right.
we address this? Do we not address this? And I feel bad. I don't know the person who said this, so I can't give them credit. So I'm kind of resharing their story. But what they had shared was take into account your employee population. And so what they were saying was if you have an employee population where the majority of them is 40 years old and they're male, maybe you don't need to address this in your organization. Maybe you don't need to put out a communication or highlight a benefit. But
Right.
if your population is between the ages of 20 and 45, maybe you
Childbearing.
do need to put something out, right? At least
Right.
highlight what benefits are offered. So I think we're in that point now where we're having those same types of conversations about what does our culture look like? What are we going to support? What are we not going to support? Same like with return to work. There's all this static out there still about return to work mandates. And at the end of the day, the business has to decide what kind of business they want to be. And if that business says, we're a return to office, we're a fully on site business, then that's what the business is, right? And
That's
that
their
is
choice.
the culture that they are defining. Whether I love that or not is besides the point, right?
Right.
And so it's as the
Exactly.
HR person, you either have to get on board and figure out how you can do that and keep your employees engaged and your talent retained, or you have to go to a different company that aligns with, your view of the workforce.
Absolutely. And what I loved about what you were sharing is that we as HR leaders have to stand up and be willing to have those hard conversations with our executive leaders, with the employee body, with a lot of stakeholders. We can't just sit back and hope it goes away. It's not. The world of work is going to forever be complex in some way, shape, or form. And if we really want to continue to have a seat at the table, then sometimes we're going to have to initiate some of these discussions and see where the company is going to be landing, and
Yeah.
then do our best to think about how to best support it, work with, corporate comms for messaging, get employee feedback and do your best to attract, retain, and develop your employees based on the environment that the company has decided that they want to embrace.
I will add, though, that I do think it's our responsibility to challenge our leadership behind closed doors when we have those opportunities to bring the data that we have from the talent and the people perspective that maybe they haven't considered. That being said,
Absolutely.
once the decision is made, you have to move
Got to
forward
be
with
on
it.
board. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that ad. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. And that leads us to our final question. I can't believe our time is almost up, but it leads nicely into it because I guess as you all know, listeners, as you all know, we always ask our guests about the 7 tactics of high performing leaders. And Shari was so kind to share that leading with courageous agility really resonated for her. No surprise. But for my new listeners out there, leading with courageous agility is all about having the courage and the fortitude to take calculated risk, to stand up for what you believe in and do the right thing, even if the future is uncertain or unclear. And so, Shari, curious minds would love to know, in your words, why did courageous agility really pop for you?
I think courageous agility for me puts you in a place where you can remain curious
Yeah,
and you can challenge from a way of wanting to bring innovation into an organization, wanting to demonstrate flexibility and trust and transparency. I have always found that that curiosity that I bring to the table and asking questions sometimes uncovers things that we didn't know were there or that we needed to talk about, and then
yeah,
gives us that ability to get courageous and say, okay, now that we have this information, how are we going to handle it? And how
that's
are we
right.
going to lean into being a little bit less risk adverse, saying yes a little bit more, and showing that there's room for failure because we know that that's going to lead to growth. So I think the more that you can be courageous in that and be agile in moving through those different phases, I think is going to make you a great leader.
I so agree. That's a drop the mic moment if there is one in this episode because, and that's why in the definition we do say calculated risk. That means you just can't go willy nilly. You need to take the information, the data, the insights that you have at hand, assimilate it, and then make the best decision possible with the information that you have, but still move forward, even if it's in baby steps. Because, like you said, if you hit the wall, you can always pivot or recalculate or do other things, but you got to take the baby steps forward to make progress. And I absolutely, loved your insights on that. Well, here we are going to have all your information, your bio, links, and things in our show notes, but I always love to give our guests airtime. So if they're interested in finding you and or Paylocity, where should they look?
Yeah, so you can find Paylocity at paylocity.com. Pretty easy there. Me personally, you can find on LinkedIn or you can find on socials. I am at HR Swagger on socials or
Love
my
it.
own website, which is askHRSwagger.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Shari, for the gift of your time today. We really appreciated it. And gosh, I was taking notes while we were talking, and my notebook is full. So I think it was a fantastic episode.
Well, Karen, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
And thank you too, listeners, for the gift of your time as well. We know that there are literally millions of other podcasts out there, and we do not take your patronage lightly. All that we ask is you like and subscribe to our podcast, favorite podcast platform of choice, and to be sure to just share our podcast with just one friend, because by doing so, that will help us all learn more about blended workforces at work. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you again for listening to the Blended Workforces at Work podcast. You can check out the show notes, additional episodes, bonus resources, and also submit guest recommendations on our website at blendedworkforcesatwork.com. You can also follow me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, or YouTube by searching for the name Karen Rhodes, with Karen being spelled Karan. And if you like the show, the greatest gift you can give would be to subscribe and leave a rating on your favorite podcast platform of choice. This podcast has been a production of Shockingly Different Leadership, a global consultancy which helps organizations execute their people, talent development, and organizational effectiveness initiatives on an on-demand, contract, fractional, or project basis. Huge thanks to the SDL production and editing team for a job well done. Bye for now.